pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So moving to 1.02, Board, do I have approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to propose an amendment to tonight's agenda to include discussion regarding the Isle of Wight policy on controversial issues in reference to our resolution that was made in the previous board on, I think it was critical race theory. I'm not certain what, anyways.
Okay.
Motion to include discussion
Okay.
regarding the Isle of Wight policy.
That's policy INB.
Okay. Is that one of the ones we have,
We have a policy INB,
but it's not in this right now?
but it's not.
It's not
does
one we were reviewing for tonight, okay. Okay. So we have a motion to amend the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of amending the agenda as stated? Aye. Okay. So we have amended the agenda. Now, does that mean we need to approve the amended, or do we just,
Where you,
Where are we putting it, Mr. Chair?
so you need to make a decision as to where you place it as a first read conversation. Do you put it there when we talk about those policies, or do you put it as a different header?
well, I think it's going to have to be a first read policy. Yeah, so it's there for us to look at.
So when we discuss policy, the new first reads under Dr. Hoden's section, we can bring it up at that point.
Okay, okay,
And I'll have Ms. McNerney pull up our policy of INB to compare it with the Isle of Wight policy INB, so you can see the comparison.
okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Brittany? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on,
So you need to approve.
we need to approve the agenda that we've just, okay. So do I have a motion to approve the revised agenda?
I make a motion to approve tonight's amended agenda.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now, moving on to 2.01, public comment. We had no one sign up ahead of time. Is there anyone from the audience who plans to speak tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Gloria Witt, District 3. I wanted to spend a moment to talk about or raise awareness around the performance data that was shared last board meeting. I sit in the back and witness about 30 slides 45 minutes later, and the final conclusion was that Black children and SWDs, and I figured out that students with disabilities are tracking about at the same pace in terms of performance. And I sit there with a level of embarrassment as a Black female, and the fact that I know that Black children are smart enough. We are not, for lack of a better word, blame it on intelligence, dumb as the numbers represent. And it bothers me. So I say to myself, what is happening here? When we're living in a world of being woke is a bad thing, but I don't really understand. I would much rather be woke than sleep. And so our children are performing, Black youth, at the same level as SWDs. We acknowledge that we needed to do more for SWDs, but yet year over year, Black youth are not performing. We can't no longer use the word diversity, inclusion, and equity, but at the heart of all of this is equity. Equity from the perspective of meeting youth where they are, creating a sense of belonging. And then I say to myself, so why aren't these kids, I'm assuming black children, because they're not performing, don't have a sense of belonging in the learning environment? And I know teachers are working hard. Administration is working hard. And our school board try to figure out ways to make them even harder workers. That's no pun intended, because that's how I interpret most of the behavior I've witnessed over the last 18 months. So what is the problem? I think it's a systemic problem in that children are the product, but yet the system is playing against them, mainly because of pacing. I was shocked when my daughter told me that on an average school day, only 4.5 hours are used to educate. I'm an educator. I teach grown people. And 4.5 hours is kind of like a workshop. And how much can you get done in 4.5 hours when the curriculum is slam dunk with 10 pounds of data in a 5-pound bag? So pacing is a problem, and it's creating a issue. I'm beginning to believe, and I don't know if the answer is right, but I'm putting it out there. Is it so much going on that children are just products and there is no sense of belonging created because there's no time?
Ms. Witt, your time's up.
Thank you.
Very much. Anyone else from the audience to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to 3.01. Board, do I have a motion for approval of previous
So moved,
minutes?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
A second?
second. So we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone? None opposed? Okay. Hmm. 4.01?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're at 4.01. This is an action item, and we met last month. We discussed the school calendar and the motion that due to the mild winter, the days we had allocated for winter weather and so forth, we didn't use. And right now, we're at 25 days, if you look at the number of hours, 25 days worth of hours of time above the 990, which is required by the Code of Virginia. So it was brought this to your attention in March and made a recommendation to amend the calendar to be June 2nd, be the last day of school for students, and then June 5th and 6th become teacher work days. And so I'd like to bring that back in front of you. We did not have a late March snowstorm or an early April storm or anything else, and none are on the horizon from what I can see. So again, as the board, you wanted to wait until we got through March to see what the weather was before making any decisions. So again, I just bring it to your attention, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have regarding that move.
So I believe we discussed this last time, and we did want to hold off, and we almost got a snowstorm that following weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So, board, do I have any thoughts on the proposed change to the calendar?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I am one who really appreciates the work that our teachers do, and I appreciate Mr. Gallagher for being their advocate. And when I listen to, the extra hours that we've put in, I really felt like initially, well, let's do something that we can help with that because the work has been done. But as I sat and I listened last week to our student data and where we are, we have not filled our learning loss gap yet. We still have learning loss. We still have a gap. So if I shift my picture of my mind from the hard work that our teachers and our staff do to the needs of our students, I know that every hour of instruction is important and it's needed. I mean, we're getting ready to end school and start summer school, so we already see a need for students to have additional instructional hours.
listened to Mrs. Whitt. I appreciate her honesty, and I appreciate her challenge. We have, according to what she's been told, 4.5 hours of daily instruction. I'm assuming that technically it's 5.5, something like that?
6.5.
6.5, is that excluding lunch,
Yes.
breaks?
Transition between classes, but you average about 5 hours and 15 minutes that were required elementary, and it's even more for secondary.
Okay. So we have a little bit more than that, Mrs. Witt, but, you're really close. The point that I think you were making, and the point that I want to make, is that every hour of instruction for our students is vital, and I think that we need it. The last thing I want to see is that we come up at the time that we're looking at data at the end of the year, the cumulative data, and find out that we haven't performed as well as we had liked. I did ask for some regional comparisons today from Mr. Gallagher. With the changes, we would have 174 instructional school days. Nelson will have 180, Lynchburg 180, and Bedford 180. So we would be showing less days. And I know our state code says 990 hours is required, but that's the minimum. I'm not satisfied with the minimum. It says 180 days or 990 hours. I would prefer them 180 days. But with the changes that we've already made, we would not make that 180. We would be at, 179? So it would be closer. So I am just really concerned with our instruction. I want to know why, when we have such need, that we're advocating for the minimum. Yes, because we want to reward hard work, but we've given bonuses, we've given professional days, we've given raises. I mean, I feel like we have been supportive of our teachers, and I want to continue to do that. But right now, I feel my need is to place our students in the forefront. And I know that, we can make this case that, the last week of school, the kids don't want to do anything. But no matter when you end school, you're always going to have the last week of school. You're just moving that painful time in which you have to focus students on learning. And I'm going to speak from experience. I've been a classroom teacher for 18 years, an administrator, way beyond that. And I know that challenge of that last week of school. And one of the things that I was able to do was I gave students project-based learning projects, and they had to start working on those when we were doing SOL reviews. And they continued to work to those together collaboratively. And at the end, when it got tough, they had projects that they were proud of, and they presented them, and they talked about them. And it was an engaging time, but it was a fun time. So there are ways to engage our students. So, just trying to get rid of those last few days because they're painful, I don't want to support that either. But I do support our teachers. What they do is phenomenal, and I appreciate everything that they have given. And I know that if the issue is that we're putting in too many instructional hours, I think that there are ways that we can change our calendars to help reflect that, so we don't have to make decisions like this at the end. It can be just something that's automated into catching up with our snow days, and we can talk about that later. But I just don't want to take the time away from our students with SOL schedules. I know it has a wide window, and I haven't seen anything specific, but if we close school 4 days early, that SOL window, I'm sure will move 4 days earlier. So to me, 4 additional days of instruction before that SOL time would be valuable. Thank you, because that's my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else on the board?
Mr. Terry, Dr. Wells, if we were to remove those days, would that affect our SOL testing schedule?
That was normal.
So based on your decisions from the last board meeting, what we did is we had our school testing coordinators as well as our Ms. Gwill here at the division level remap not only their testing schedule, so it bumps right up to the very last day that they're here, which actually moved people only about a day and a half based on what we had put in place. We try not to use Mondays, we try not to use Fridays because we don't want to back-to-back things, but we had the leadership teams at each of the schools and our testing coordinators at each of the schools revamp it so they have one that would work, that there was original testing, and another one that would work if the board decided to shift and move the days. One of the things that we did talk to them about was their 45-day plans, which started back in January, where they mapped out exactly what they taught. We realized that because we have not had any snow days this year, their pacing was well ahead of where they would normally be, so they've covered the content that they normally would not have covered because that we were in school and we didn't miss any days this year. So they had that where we usually pad in our pacing for days. They've used them and they've gotten through the content a whole lot quicker than they would normally have in any other school year. So they're actually have banked time during their 45-day plan, which they're excited about, and they'll utilize it anyway that you see fit.
Mr. Terry?
Yes, ma'am.
Another question. Have you heard any negative feedback from teachers about removing those days?
The only thing that I was concerned with is that they would not have gotten through content, but then when we started meeting with leadership teams, we did our instructional rounds, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. We just kind of asked them and talked to students, and I haven't heard any negative in regards to it. And I thought we would get some pushback from our testing, our division level testing and our school level testing, and that was not the case either. They were able to work it to where it didn't impact the testing schedule as bad as they thought that they were going to.
Thank
So.
you.
Anything else?
Chairman Terry?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I have one concern, and it's our attendance. And are these kids going to show up? And if they don't, what is that going to do for our attendance with the state?
So I can address the testing portion of it.
She's looking excited behind you.
She is very excited, and I'm excited for her. The closer we have testing to the end of the year, the more we can guarantee that kids are going to come. And that's specifically at the secondary level because those are verified credits where kids have to come in, they have to take the test, they have to be at school. And the moment they step on our property, whether they're there for 30 seconds, 5 seconds when they're enrolled, they count as attendance. We want them there so we can continue teaching them and having good interactions with them. But I know Marie is very excited that we're going to test right up to the very last day of school now.
I am. I would also be excited if we had enough content to take us all the way through the end of school. But what I've been hearing is that we are ahead of pace, and therefore teachers may not have the content to continue, which means they're going to basically be doing busy work. And that's when our kids stop showing up and they're not engaged. So yes, it could have an effect on some of our chronic absenteeism rates, especially if students miss that entire last week. That would be 5 days of attendance that would definitely affect our chronic absenteeism rates.
Thank you so much.
But I would add, if we're in school, the expectation will be they'll be doing work that is appropriate work, not busy work. That'll be an expectation. So no matter what decision you make, if I have kids, if we're going to be in school that week, they're going to be doing something that is productive and meaningful. And so again, it's your decision as a board, and I'll leave it to you.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I've heard all good things, Ms. Thompson. Surely we are concerned with learning, and we're also concerned with absenteeism. Dr. Wells, refresh my memory on, you made this recommendation based on?
My teacher council brought it to my attention in the March council meeting, and they were just talking about the fact that we hadn't had any weather. So I just talked to the senior staff and talked to Mr. Gallagher, looked at our numbers and looked at where our numbers were. And therefore, we kind of wanted to bring that to your attention of where we were. And again, that's kind of based off of the request of the teacher council, and I met with them. And then we just did some more research on it and came to that recommendation.
And from what I understand from Dr. Norman and Ms. Patron, that I use the word, you all use the word banked, that the concern is that we are okay if we came out on the 2nd. When I say okay, teachers have banked that in there somewhere. Is that what you said?
So I'm going to try to say this as concise as I can. So do I think we're okay, where we're going to come out right on track where we need to be when we give the test? No, it takes 4 years to make up what we missed. And everybody needs to acknowledge that. Do I think that our teachers have grown our children and gotten students to perform at a better rate and shown growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year more than they have over the last 2 years? Absolutely. We're showing strides better than we did when we gave you data on our MAP assessments. So I'm confident that that students are showing growth. Where I still continue to be concerned is that it's not a learning loss because we haven't taught it yet, okay? Is our pacing of what teachers normally do and what kids can come in at grade level 2 do are on 2 different levels right now. And it takes us about 2 years to adjust those pacing guides, to get teachers to write lessons that differentiate lower than they normally would and higher than they normally would. So you got a different balance there. That takes a good 2 years to be able to implement with a crosswalk and everything. We're just in that first year of doing it. So I'm pleased with what we've done this year, but I know it's not going to be pre-COVID data. We're not there yet.
Well, no, I appreciate
Yeah.
your answer, but you were going deeper than I was. I was saying, do these 4 days,
Will they make a difference? Well, we have a student right there who can tell you what she wants to do. And I will tell you that it'll make a difference for teachers because then I have my staff working right now, Marvin McGinnis, he can tell you, he's pulled in and he has pulled together project-based assessments. He's brought in history teachers and science teachers. And so we have things that we will be offering to teachers to be able to do this if we continue on, because we know that's going to be a challenge for our teachers because what they would have normally done during the school year, they're ahead of the game. Some of them 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the game because we haven't had any days
yeah, I
out.
think you answered that then, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the board?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I do understand, and I want to praise everybody for covering content and sticking to it and getting ahead of the game. But I also have to recognize that content covered does not mean student success. Otherwise, we would not have a summer learning. And so we can't just say that. We have students that need things. We have students that need instruction. They need small group. They need to go back and review. They need to catch up. 4 years to catch up, I believe is what you said, Dr. Norman. Well, to me, there has to be some learning loss along the way if it's going to take 4 years to catch up. So I value every single day, and I think that our students need to be there. I think that there are students who are going to struggle, who are struggling, and will 4 days make a difference for everyone? Maybe not for those that are already successful, but for those that are not, I think that it could. Maybe not all of them. So, anyway, you know my thoughts.
May I make a suggestion? If I were going to advise the board, on what I think would be good for our children who are struggling. It wouldn't be that we would take those 4 days and we would intentionally target our Tier 3 supports for those kids that we know are struggling, we know need the additional, and would be those children that would be required to attend, and those that need to, I mean, that is what you do when you have a year-long school. You have these weeks where kids, where you know that they have to have it, that they're not on grade level. Those would be the ones that I would target, that I would ensure that had to come to those 4 days. You wouldn't use all your teaching staff. You wouldn't use all of your, all of the kids wouldn't show up. We would have to do a waiver with the state in order to make sure that that was we would treat it like a pre-summer program. But that's when I can drill down, and that's when I can guarantee intentionality with students. And Mr. Neighbors, I know that would be part of the things that you would bring to the table with your students with disabilities, along with any other struggling child that we have.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Well, Dr. Norman, I find it enlightening and lovely that you said that, because as I spent quite a lot of time dwelling on this, I had that same vision. And I said, we don't need all the kids. We need the ones that are struggling. We need small group. And wouldn't it be great? We would have all of our staff that would be at your fingertips. And I thought, but no, that's going beyond my role as a school board member, and I wasn't going to suggest that. But you just hit exactly what was in my mind as a vision. So I don't know if that's possible, because that was another hesitation I had. But I just think, why not think outside the box? Why not be creative and help our students that need it? So
It would be a lot of logistical work to do that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I like both what you said, but I tell you, that, to try to do that right now,
Logistical.
I just don't think that's too much going on. Who's gonna come, who's gonna get the word, who's gonna drive, ride, be, teach? Isn't it a little late to try that? Maybe I'm over-guessing what you're trying to do. Have a select group of children. I mean, that's remediation, and that's what summer school is for.
I mean, our schools have identified their Tier 3 students needing Tier 3 supports. We know who those students are who need Tier 3 supports. The logistical aspect of it would be transportation, and then making sure we have them there, and then and identifying the actual specific areas that we need to focus on with those students, and just making sure we have all that worked out. Is it something we can do? I would feel it is something we can do. We can do anything we put our heads to. I mean, we have a very talented staff, but it would require a lift. So I'll.
The state would have to approve it.
Chairman Terry,
Yes, ma'am.
could I make a suggestion that maybe we move forward with this next year and build it in, where we are preparing for it all of next year and trying to cobble something up and hope the state approves it? And it just seems like a lot to do in a short amount of time, especially with our teachers that are kind of stressed out still.
Okay. Anyone else on the board?
Mr. Terry,
Yes, sir.
it's, this probably isn't the first time that we didn't have snow in the winter, but this is the first time I'm hearing about, dropping out before the 180 days. I understand there's been a lot of struggle and a lot of hard work going into this school year. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, the planning that went into this prior to, hey, we're gonna shut things down 4 days early. And the only thing I heard was we were trying to control student absenteeism. And, hearing from Ms. Witt today and hearing about the struggles that are still happening throughout the school year, I'm thinking we should have planned the 180 days just like any other year and then maybe take action next year to maybe have longer winter breaks or whatever in the following year, it's tough to stop the avalanche once it starts rolling. I'm sure, faculty and students are thinking, hey, we could get out early. And once you start that avalanche, you're not going to stop it, and I don't think changing it now would have a benefit, but I kind of wish that we would have planned it a little bit better to not throw the shadow of, hey, we might get out early this year. We know there's a struggle out there. We know we have kids that are falling behind. And as a testament to our staff and faculty, they're working very, very hard. And the challenge is real, and they're struggling to try to find a way to move forward. And maybe everybody does need that break to regroup and bring the fight back next year, but I don't think the fight's over this year. I think we need to keep pushing.
I need a mic.
All I have.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment? I think part of the issue might be the length of the school year. If you remember, the calendar committee last year, prior to this year, added different breaks and planning days into the calendar and extended it, which was, I think, beneficial to them, and extended it to the point where it's longer than all of our regional calendars. So I think those breaks along the way were probably appreciated. But now if you were to, just making a point, if you were to approve the proposal and students left on the 2nd and then we had 2 planning days, we would be still getting out either later or at the same time as all of the regional divisions. And I think that's part of what it is. I know because the year goes by, and I know it's a long year, and then I think part of the teachers recommending it might be looking around saying, now we're getting out so late. That comes with asking for those different breaks along the way, and a fall break and all of that. I mean, I do get that, but I think that might just be part of the issue coming into it. Why there's a hope that folks could get out at the same time as other regional divisions at the end of the school year, most of which they began at the same time with. That's part of it, and then rejuvenating prior to working summer school, getting a chance to take a quick break before I jump right back in to teach summer school. I just wanted to bring those several points up. I'm not advocating either way. I think that's part of where some of it came from in the initial request. We tend to forget a little bit about the small benefit of the breaks and additional work days built in each grading period along the way when we get to the end of the year and we're going a week longer than our neighbors.
Mr. Gallagher, you said that if we were to change the schedule, we'd be at 179 days.
Now, currently at 179 contractual teacher days, and it's a 200-day. Am I right? It's 180. I'm sorry, you're correct. 179 days is what we're currently at.
But how many hours?
Yeah, I have that. So if we were to approve the elimination of the days, the 4 days, we would still have remaining an overage of 130 hours over the 990. We'd be at 1120.5, which is 130.5 over the required 990. I know that's a requirement. And that also equates to 20.1 additional days over the requirement. If we approved those days to be removed, that's where we would be. And if we did not, then we'd be at 24 additional days over the requirement.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just been made aware that I know tonight Bedford County is proposing their last day be the 26th, and they're then cutting 4 days off their calendar. Again, that's their proposal to their board. Again, their board has to take action as well. I'm not sure what Lynchburg is. I think Lynchburg is bringing a proposal to their board as well. But again, what the other counties, that's not here nor there. But again, it's just where y'all feel we should be as a board. And I'll leave it to y'all to make this tough decision. So.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Terry, 2 things, maybe 3, come to mind. I want to make certain I'm understanding Mr. Gallagher correctly, that The reason our calendar is a little longer than other districts is because we have added in teacher work days and a fall break that maybe other districts don't have. Is that correct?
That's correct. There were teacher workdays primarily, but I think one or two additional, breaks added, like the fall break was something we had not had before.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. The second thing is, from Dr. Norman, I thought I heard that teachers from their hard work are ahead, some as much as 2 weeks. So even if we were to take those 4 days off, there would still be approximately 10 extra days that they're ahead?
Right.
Okay, and those days that they're ahead, can those days be worked in as far as the small group stuff, the extra stuff?
Absolutely. They're
So they
using
have
them
that
as their intervention and remediation
okay.
and spiral reviews back on
Excellent.
things from the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So they're being intentional with how have banked time and are using
Great.
it.
And that's
Okay.
part of the 45-day plan, based off of knowing where the material they had to cover in a set amount of time. They built in the spiral review so they can come back and reteach information
Good.
that was taught earlier in the year, make sure the kids are caught up.
Great. Okay, so my final thought is, there's so much incentive when we've worked hard and gotten ahead to see that break. And I really do see the value to me of it. To me, it's like if you have sick days or vacation days that you haven't used, that you lose them at the end of the year instead of getting to roll them. If you can roll them, you'll have fewer teachers not coming in because they know they're still going to get it. And so as long as we're able to use those extra days, which you've already explained, I would like to reward our teachers with, I've worked really hard, and I understand the calendar is longer because we've given extra work days and an extra break, and I think that's really good. But I also think it's really good to say, we see it, we know it, you've done it, you're using these extra days, even with losing those 4 days, for spiraling, for testing, training, for helping those small groups. So that's my thought.
Dr. Norman, quick question. You said that if we remove those 2 days, we would be testing right up till the end.
Yes, sir. Expedited retakes where if kids get close on passing, they get to retake the test within a certain time frame. Those last 2 days would be expedited retakes where we would retest students.
So those 2 days would be used for retakes if we went those 2 days.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
something that we could consider. If we are looking at it from a teacher perspective, we do have one professional day on the 9th of June that you could eliminate. If we were to keep the calendar as it is for instruction, you could always eliminate one teacher workday for the teachers.
I think that might be a challenge, not to give them a day. Well, they'll end up working anyway because they need a day to wrap the year up. As it currently stands with the proposal, they will actually have 2 teacher workdays. So, I mean, that's the only downside of that proposal. We had thought about that. Some divisions actually will go into a Saturday workday to trying to make things, so they don't have to come back the next week if they end on a Friday. But there's quite a bit, I think, to wrap up.
Just a matter of the closed out procedures, make sure they have everything closed out properly, but that's something we could consider.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Okay. So consideration for those 2 days, what's the pleasure of the board? We either need to leave it the same or we need a motion, so I'm waiting to hear what.
I make a motion that we leave it the same and that we don't change the school calendar.
Okay. There is a motion. Do I have a second? Okay. I'm not hearing a second, so
I Just a quick, for clarity, with the motion you just made, would they have to come to school then, or will be ending it early? Sorry, got confused in my head here.
It would be leaving the school calendar as it is stated right now.
The motion on
not
the
be
floor
changing.
is to leave the calendar as is, which has the
Come till June 9th.
last day of school, the 9th, and then a teacher workday on
Last day, the 8th.
the 8th, excuse me, the 8th, and teacher workday on the 9th is what's on the table right now as proposal.
Okay. So.
If there's no
We-
second,
We don't have a second, so that motion has fallen. Do we have another motion, or?
Motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the 4 days be removed,
The amended
the
calendar?
amended calendar.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
So it passes the amended calendar.
5-6. Okay, thank you.
Chairman Terry, I would like to make a suggestion that we do take in consideration what Abby stated and try to build that into next year. Because it was a really good idea and plan, I just think.
Talking about Dr. Norman's idea?
Yes, sorry.
We can look on that with our calendar and see.
Yeah.
I do think some of that also, next year, our calendars, we have already taken some days out. The calendar you approved for next year does have us getting out around Memorial Day. Due to, we took some of those extra days, the breaks that were in there and took some of those out. But we also, I think, would also be dependent on, we could have a provisional plan in there, but I think we'd also have to look at, if we get 3 feet of snow in February, and we have to miss school, then that's something, I think it might be good to have something in place. If we want to plan on something where we bring in our students that need Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, we build that in as a separate item onto our calendar between the last day of school and summer school. And that way we could have some extended time with those students as necessary, during those timeframes. So we could look at building something like that into our calendar, but maybe not at of cutting days off the school year for that, if that makes sense.
That would probably be an incentive too for a lot of these kids to buckle down during the school year. So they get those extra days off at the end of the year.
So that's something we can look at building in and trying to get all the logistics worked out for that.
Dr. Wells, there's also ways that you can build the calendar in which you identify the days that will be utilized
Correct.
for snow days.
Right.
And if those days aren't utilized, then other days will be given back. And
Yes.
so it doesn't come down to, oh, we got a pot at the end of the
Yes, ma'am.
year.
Right.
Because I just don't think that when we have students in need, and you've heard mine,
agree.
I'm not going to
Yes.
go on, but I just don't like the way it looks, that we're just
Yes, ma'am.
saying it doesn't matter. It
Yes, ma'am.
does.
Okay.
Ms. Terry?
Yes, sir. I heard
One
that
more
word.
comment. The calendar, as we think about it for next year, and you're talking about adding in breaks, is there any way to maybe add in those smaller group
So-
one-on-one sessions?
So you've approved the calendar.
Right.
And with the start date and end date and breaks in between.
Right.
If we were doing anything different with that calendar for next year, you have to come back to the board for approval, or for recommended changes. So if you'd like us to consider, based off tonight's discussion, that's something that we could consider. If those days we have in there, that some of those work days or other days we have, we could consider some of those being placed as remediation days. I know some school divisions have built their calendar next year on 175 days versus 180 days, especially over in the valley. Some of those in our region are building off 174, 175, 177-day calendars, and they're using those additional days as teacher work days and remediation days and things like that as well, which is something we could look at doing as well. It shortens your official school calendar, but again, with the hours we're putting in, that's something you could look at and build in remediation days off of that additional school calendar. You'd pull days out for the whole student body, but you'd add days in for remedial programs for those students who may need it.
That wouldn't be a bad idea. Knowing that next year's approved calendar, we did remove the substantial number of breaks and planning days because the committee and all staff would rather get out earlier. That was the big push, if you remember. So those that we entered this school year were basically eliminated for next year's calendar. So there's not as much of that in there, which we also said that could also lead to longer periods of time without breaks. That's just the result of that. But if you were to lower from the 180 to, say, a 175, you could build 5 days in for either work days or remediation and different things like that. So anticipating, not having to lose days for inclement weather and then put them in there as inclement weather makeup, in the event that you do have, a lot of those days.
So let's, if with your thought here, let us do some thinking and look at that and bring something to you if that's something you would like us to do, to look at different options from the discussion tonight, if that's the desire of the board.
Board? Yes, ma'am.
One more quick question. Going back to our public comment, it was mentioned that our students are only getting 4 hours of instruction a day. Is that accurate?
The instructional day is 5.5 hours, and that's without it's with all transition, lunchtime, and all that time pulled out. I think we're speaking of requirements, required time to get to the 990 in 180 days would be less, but we go beyond that, so our instructional day is 5.5 hours.
So you have to give.
I'm sorry, 6.5 hours.
6.5
I apologize.
hours.
I meant to say 6.5.
And if you take that out, all the transition and lunch, home base in the morning or advisory,
Right.
it comes down to about 5 3/4. What we're required to give is 120 minutes of reading and language arts instruction at the elementary, 75 minutes minimum for math at elementary, and 100 minutes for physical education per week on average for elementary. And then when you get to middle and high school, you have to have 140 clock hours for a credit-bearing course. And that usually is about 45 to 50 minutes a day for 141 days. That's what it basically averages out to, 142 days. So you have built-in time if we miss at any time.
Thank you.
Anything else on the board? Okay, hearing nothing. Dr. Wells, moving on to 5.01.
5.01 is administrative, and Dr. Hoden.
Okay, the first thing we'd like to talk about is just update the board, and Mr. Chair, members of the board, update you in reference to the construction project at Amherst County High School. If you haven't been by there, the house located at 178 Lancer Lane is no longer there. It is graded out and ready for a parking lot here, hopefully in the near future. And then secondarily, obviously, the bid has been posted on EVA as well as the county, Amherst County's Board of Supervisors website. The purchasing agent has done that, Mr. Profit. We had our first pre-bid meeting yesterday afternoon at 3:30, and we have a second pre-bid meeting next Thursday, the 13th at 3:30. That will give the various contractors 2 different days to come and go walk through the schools and ask any questions they may have. We close the bids on April the 25th at 2 o'clock, and at that time we'll know roughly what their bid proposals are and who is also bidding on the project as well.
Board, anything? Okay. Thank you, sirs. 5.02.
5.02 is the revisions to the policy manual.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, you have in front of you policies from Dr. Wells, myself, Dr. Norman, Mr. Gallagher, and Ms. Sukanich. Those recommendations for ACPS policy manual changes are submitted to you in response to the updates sent from the Policy Services Department at VSBA. Each revision should be examined, and the school board should decide whether to adopt these policies. The revisions represent VSBA attempts to bring policies into compliance with new and existing laws and regulations, and this is the first read for those policies.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Board, anything for Dr. Hoden?
So IMB is next, but yes.
And we added,
If y'all want to discuss these policies first, then we'll bring up the policy that Ms. Justice added to the agenda.
Ms. Chuck? Yes, ma'am.
Terry, when I look through these policies, my main issue is the changing of the wording from shall maintain, which are imperatives and accountability terms, to more present tense, which are more descriptive. They're saying this is what's happening. But if something falls through the cracks and it isn't happening according to policy, I believe that there is more strength language-wise if we keep the imperative tenses. So that is my thought. And also in IIBEAGAB, it was removing, no, it was adding a clause that, not clause, a passage that made it so users of the system agree to indemnify the school board for any losses, costs, or damages relating to or arising out of any violation of this policy or the technology use of guidelines. What does that mean?
That means if they do something they're not supposed to do and they crash our system, they're responsible to pay for the damages.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at policy CBG, superintendent's evaluation, I really don't have any problem with what's been added. I know that they're just updating it to include culturally competent parts of the superintendent's evaluation. And so that's fine, but I would like for us to consider maybe moving that under the bullet 2 and listing all of the competencies that the superintendent has to meet, because the way the way it's reading, it's talking about student achievement and cultural competency, and that's all it's talking about. And there's much more to a superintendent's evaluation. So in bullet 2, you could just list them all out in order to be more clear as to what the competencies are. The other one was in DA. It says that it suggests that we change is authorized, that the superintendent is authorized to make movement. And it would be taking away may be authorized. And so I feel like that is limiting the board's oversight of a superintendent. You know, not necessarily this board, but down the road, you know, you may not have a superintendent that you really want just shifting that around. You may want some of that control. So I just think it's a little bit of giving away some of the board's oversight fiscally. So I'm contemplating that one. Then in DGC, it says that the cafeteria funds would be included under school activity funds, I believe. It also states that we have the authority to make our policy in which we can decide what school activity funds are included. So my question is do we currently have our cafeteria funds as a activity fund? I didn't think so. And if we were to put that in there, what impact would that have on our processes and our staffing?
For the main, excuse me, for the main child nutrition account, you would want to have that remain with the county, because that's where the county processes all the bills and the payments. This might be something, and I can look into it further, as far as not meeting the overall child nutrition account, maybe a different, maybe that's not the intent. So I could look into that and give you some feedback on that.
Okay, because the way I read it was that was included in the revision, but that
It
we
does.
didn't, we could do it one way or the other. So I felt like that we probably wanted to keep it the way it was, and we may need to be aware of that as we move forward with
Absolutely.
approval of that policy. But yeah, feedback would be great. And then in policy ECAB, it deletes reference to policy JFCR-R and JFC. But we chose to keep JFC-R and JFC.
Correct. So we still have JFC and JFC-R. The state from VSBA does not maintain that policy. I don't when I was reading over this, I didn't see where deleting that reference makes any difference into what we do in our policy. So to make, my thought process on this was, so we don't have to make it an Amherst County Public Schools policy. We know we have a JFC-R, but just because it's not cross-referenced here does not mean we wouldn't utilize our JFC-R. So I just was trying to keep it from becoming an ACPS policy, so we're still protected by VSBA on this policy.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Also, I know we've talked about in the past of listing all of our Amherst County Public School policies. Do you know if we've been keeping track of those so that?
So on the memo you received, we said if they're ACPS or VSBA policy on our memos to you on this, but I did not give you a separate listing of all the policies that are ours versus those that are VSBA. But when we give you policy updates each month, when we get policy updates, it'll state in our memos whether it's an ACPS policy or a VSBA policy.
And I appreciate that, that's helpful. I asked that because I know that we're accountable for reviewing policy like every 2 years, and I just want to make sure that the Amherst County's public school ones are getting reviewed as well. But then that leads me to GAB and IIBEA. That, I believe, is an Amherst County Public School policy. And we're looking at the VSBA suggested policy updates. So how would the law change? I mean, I'm assuming that the VSBA is updating their policy because of a law change. So what I need to know is, what was that law change? And how do we need to update our Amherst County Public School policy?
Okay.
So that information will be helpful.
I can have that for you.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's all I had at the moment on the policies.
Mr. Terry?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Regarding the JFC-R and JFC, I personally think it's important to keep that reference there because we as a board might know that, but the general citizen or parent, when they start to investigate what their rights are and what the policies are for our school district, it's really important that those cross-references are there. So that would be my concern on that. And then it was mentioned that if we adopt it as an ACPS policy, that we lose certain legal protection that VSBA offers. My understanding is that it's not that much protection, so I would like to know the limits of that protection if we adopt a VSBA versus keeping it ACPS.
We can do some research on that for you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else from the board?
Okay. So any further discussion on those policies before we bring up I and B? Okay.
No.
Can you bring up I and B, Ms. McNerney? Okay. This is our current policy I and B. And I'll read it, y'all can see it as well, but the Amherst County School Board recognizes the preparation for effective citizenship is one of the major purposes of education. The preparation for effective citizenship includes the study of issues that are controversial. Such study is carried out in an atmosphere free from bias, prejudice, or coercion. In teaching about controversial issues, teachers are expected to establish a learning environment where each student can study the issues within a curriculum that are appropriate to the student's knowledge and maturity, and provide instruction in an atmosphere that is free from bias, prejudice, or coercion. Although the instructional program includes study of the political party system in the United States, the school board does not endorse any political party or candidate. And that was last adopted on June 10th, 2021. So that was our current policy. And this is the one from Isle of Wight that Ms. Justice was referencing. Ms. Justice,
Dr. Wells, do we have a copy of the resolution that was made by the previous board in 2021?
The resolution, we do have that saved. I don't have it in front of me, obviously, or I'll have it for you, but it is in our records. But that was not in relation to policy I and B. That was a separate.
Yes. So my personal thought, as far as looking at the Isle of Wight policy, is it appeared to put in policy some provisions which would then support that resolution that was made by the previous board. So that was my interest in having the board discuss this and consider it for our own policy.
Can I make a recommendation to the board?
Yes.
Mr. Chair. So what I would recommend, since this is all first read, is I would recommend that you have copies of this, that you review this as a board. Y'all can discuss this throughout the month. I think we need to get it to legal counsel if this was a desire of the board to move this forward to review, just because it is a policy that's outside the VSBA purview and it's different than the policy we currently have. But I would, I think it'd be good for you as a board to discuss this, and then if you so desire to bring it back at the May meeting, and we can bring it back. But this is all first read anyway. That way, you would give you a chance to kind of look into it a little deeper than just at the surface as we have right now.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Board?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if this is a first read, and it's just been brought to us by a fellow board member, if we look at this and compare the two, and we look at our resolution, and say next meeting we decide that we want to do more work on this, we don't have to approve or disapprove this. We can just move it forward with the work that we're doing on it, right?
Right,
So
right.
we
Correct.
could have some good discussion
Yes.
on it. Don't have to just
Right. As within the policies. Right.
next week. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
So you may look at this and say you might want a couple of things out of this, but not agree with everything in this, and you might, as a board, decide to, make a blended policy, which would be an ACPS policy.
Okay. Anything else on the board? Okay, so the first reads, we'll come back to this next month.
Thank you. So next on the agenda for us is 5.03, which is discipline update. So we're going to show broad information regarding discipline beginning first semester, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Hoden from here.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is the mid-year discipline report that was prepared. Also, well, thank you. Dr. Wells, you okay, since it's up there now?
Oh, yes.
As you'll see, Dr. Wells is going to tell you something before we start.
So we have a new member with us tonight, Dr. Marie Petrone. She just completed her dissertation and defended her dissertation, so she is now Dr. Petrone as opposed to Mrs. Petrone.
She's prepared a speech, just kidding. Anyways, the mid-year discipline report prepared by Dr. Petrone and I, like it was prepared last year. So you will see the incident management in Power School. The column on the left was what was prepared last year. That is the 2021 first semester, and then the first semester incidents for 2022. So you see we've listed the BAP, the BSC, the BASO. For the first one, the BAP, 160 last year, 495 this year. That is where tardies are calculated, so quite a few more tardies are being processed this year. The BSCs also rose. The BESOs, behaviors that endanger self or others, doubled. We have BSO, school operations, those rose a little bit. Relationship behaviors also rose a little bit, and then potentially dangerous went from 2 to 1. So the total incidents was 1318 in 2021, and in 2022 they were at 1865. So we had about a 547 incident increase, and those are incidents. And the student population roughly stayed the same. So some trend data for discipline referrals, first semester incidents for 2021, students with 3 referrals or more. So you'll see the column on the left again in 2021 is Amherst County High School 45. On the right, we had 104. AAC 9, and then this year 11. Manelson Middle School 56. And then 66 for this year, and Amherst Middle School 23, and they're at 11. And then the elementary schools 17, and now 48. So at the very bottom, you'll see the total 150 out of 3,987 students. So what we want you to see here is that only 150 students in 2021 first semester had a referral. So that's only less than 4% of the students. And this year, 240 out of the 3,976, so roughly 6% of the students had 3 referrals or more. So not a lot of our students have 3 referrals or more. A lot of this discipline is accumulated by 5 to 6% of the students. Elementary schools, so we have Amelon, this year, this is all this year's data, 102 referrals, 51 students, and we did not update the list, but just for an example, Amelon has 444 students, so about 11% of the students have a referral. AES, 53 referrals, 17 students. Their population is 264, and they're at about 6.5%. CES, 36 referrals, 22 students. They have 330 total, so again, roughly about 6.5%. Elon, 34 referrals from 15 students. That is a population of 332, so about 4.5%. Madison Heights, 116 with 38 students in their population, 415. They're roughly at about 9%. And then Temperance, 5 referrals, 3 students, so that's about 3% of their student population for elementary. Same information for secondary schools. ACHS, 778 referrals. Tardies are in that 148 of that, and that's out of 325 students. So that's about 26% of the students that have a referral for their AEC, 90 referrals for 30 students. Amherst Middle, 105, 59 students. Their population is 346, so about 17%. And then Manellison, 620 referrals, 188 students. Population is 507, so about 37%. Dr. Wells and Dr. Petrone and I talked about Manellison today. We're going to dig into those numbers just a little bit deeper for that school.
And it's also important that the AEC numbers kind of distort the data a little bit because our AEC numbers also reflecting the high school numbers and the middle school numbers depending on the students. So some of those students are counted twice, so it's not much, but it does. So if you see a student at AEC, that's also showing up at the high school as well because of how we have to do the data.
Because they count their home school, if that makes sense. All right, so the secondary schools suspension.
Question?
Just a second.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Hoden, can you, that last bit about students that are considered homeschool, can you explain that to me again?
Yeah, the high school is the base school for those students, or Manellison or Amherst Middle is the base school for those students. So even though they attend AEC, the school so they count for AEC for our numbers at AEC, but they also count for the data for their high school or Amherst Middle, Manellison, depending on what their base school is. So
Right.
that's what he meant by that.
So if they're a Manellison student, but they're at AEC, their data has to go on to Manellison too, because that is their home, that would be their home school.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
I'm serious.
Not home school,
Hold that, I'm
their
like-
home school.
Base.
Yes.
Thank
Their
you.
Base school, yes,
There you
ma'am,
go.
sorry.
Base school,
Base
thanks.
school, I'll use that term from now on. I apologize for that.
Thank you.
All right, next slide. Secondary schools are suspension in ISD for the first semester. So basically, we have had in their secondary schools 1,291 days of ISD for 731 events, and 861 students have contributed to that ISD. And then out-of-school suspension, 631 days served, 113 events, and 100 students contributing to that. And then the Alternative Suspension Center, ASC, which remember, does not count as suspension. It's an alternative to suspension. Days of ASC is 364 events, 150, and students contributing 111.
And it's important to note that if we didn't have our suspension center, those 364 days would count as days absent as opposed to days
Correct.
in school. So it's not only is it serving the purpose of providing some counseling services, things for students that are there, and some, things that also keeps them in school, and they're not home doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Correct. So feel like that has been a success. All right, for
Dr. Hoden?
Yes, ma'am.
Another question.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you'll have this answer, or you're just getting ready to give it to us. Of those out-of-school suspensions, do we have an approximate percentage of those are related to marijuana and vapes?
So if you hang on just a second, I'll get to some of that. All right. So you're ahead of the curve there, Ms. Justice. All right. So for secondary suspensions, the incidents that lead to suspensions in 2021, fights and assaults 43, and then this year, first semester, we had 74. Weapons 9 last year and 4 for this year. The drugs and alcohol last year was 6. This year it was 12. So of that, the drugs and alcohol, 2 were alcohol and 10 were related to drugs. Now, what we did for this year, we didn't have the data for last year, the nicotine vapes, and again, these were not the THC vapes, we had 73. Now, in parentheses, you'll see ASC, even though that I've indicated this was leading to suspension, the first offense for nicotine vape is ASC. So that's 73 incidents that would have led to suspension had we not had ASC.
Another
And
question?
remember, this is first semester only.
Right.
So till January 13th. Nothing after that is in this chart.
Gotcha. Mr. Terry, may
Yes, ma'am.
I ask a question? Okay. Do we know the number of days that we had in school in fall 2021 versus the number of days we had in school in 2022? Because last year we had school canceled. And so I'm just wondering if.
Typically, first semester is very close because remember, it's through January 13th,
but
so
we-
we don't have a lot of weather.
But last year, though,
We had a
Oh,
lot of
that's right.
quarantining.
we had
Had
to
quarantine.
shut schools down for about a week and a half, so we lost about 10 to 14 days of school.
Right.
Then and one thing that's important to note, which I was going to bring up at the end of this, but I'll bring it up now, is that you might see numbers increasing from last year to this year, but we had a lot of students who were quarantined 14, 15, 30, and more days than that for some. You got other students who were doing virtual learning as opposed to being back in school this year. They're back in the building. So you have more opportunities this year for students to have these behaviors as well. But yes, we did lose about, I want to say it's about 14 to 15 days last year that we were closed due to the outbreak we had at the beginning of the year with COVID.
Right. So that was part of what I needed to say toward the end was, this year we didn't have virtual students to quarantine, et cetera. And then one other set of information that I wanted to go back to on this. Understand that for this first set of numbers here, roughly, we have 3,900 students. Roughly 750 students have a referral, and that's 19%. So that means that 80% of your students, 81% of your students in school have 0 referrals. So I think I kind of wanted to end with that, so that as you look at this, we've got a lot of good kids. Not that the 19 are, it's, just some poor choices. So the numbers here for the discipline, you see that the 5 or 6% of students have 3 or more referrals, but, we have 81% of our students that have 0. So I kind of wanted to go back to that and end on that for that little bit in the slideshow. All right,
Any questions?
questions? All right, we're going to move on to.
Ms. Justice?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's actually more, I think, of just an affirmation. I believe that one of the things as a board we were looking forward to in this coming year was a tightening of discipline, which would result in more consequences, and hopefully kids will pull in and say, okay, it's not going to be tolerated. So I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
wanted to bring that out.
And I think you've seen that, for all of you that served on the discipline committee, I think you've seen that, overarching that students are certainly held accountable for their actions, and not that they weren't previously, but, it's certainly been tightened up. The next few slides are on bullying, and Dr. Petrone is going to take over from here.
Good evening. I would like to start by thanking you for passing the bullying policy earlier this year. Part of that policy was that we would report this data to you every year. So this is our first time collecting this baseline data. And so I can go through this just briefly. The high school had 22 investigations of bullying this year. AEC had 5, Amherst Middle School 4, Manellison had 50. And then most of our elementary schools had 1, except for Elin, who had 5, and Madison Heights, who had 7. So we ended up doing 96 total bullying investigations during the first semester. And when we look at the results of those investigations, the blue bar is cases that were actually found to be bullying and the student received consequences for bullying. A lot of times the students receive consequences for something that's not actually bullying, like inappropriate language, arguing, peer conflicts, things like that. But these are actual cases that were proven to be bullying. And then the red bar is where the case was investigated and it definitely wasn't bullying. It was either a misunderstanding or something was misheard or it didn't even occur. And then the yellow bar is where most of our situations end up, where we continue to monitor. Like something may have happened once, but it only happened once and we're not really sure. So we're gonna keep watching and make sure that these kids are okay. And if it continues, then it's going to be labeled as bullying. So where we've ended up is with the high school having, well, they didn't have any cases founded as bullying. Most of their cases are continued to monitor. We had 1 bullying case at AEC, 1 at Amherst Middle School, 2 founded at Manellison, and then 1 founded at Elin. I did not break out the elementary cases because I didn't want it to be too identifying since there was only 1 investigation in most of those schools. Some things that we learned from this is that we have a lot of students making inappropriate comments, a lot of name calling, a lot of hate speech, and a lot of times parents and students will bring that to us and say, my child's being bullied, this is what's being said. And they're not wrong about what's being said, and it's definitely concerning, but what we're doing is we're labeling that as hate speech or as inappropriate comments or whatever has occurred. So they're not being called out for bullying because it's not an ongoing issue where there's a power imbalance, but it's usually something that's mutual, or it's a child who's just being inappropriate in general and wasn't directing it at that individual student. So when it is something that meets the policy criteria, it is labeled as bullying at this point. We've also had a lot of things that occur outside of our school buildings, and parents call us and say, my child's being bullied, but it's happening on Snapchat, at daycare, not in our buildings, and there's not, and while we sympathize and we try and make plans to keep those families apart or those students apart, and we do everything we can to manage that, we don't have anything that says that it happened in our building. So sometimes those cases occur as well. Any questions about bullying?
Board? Okay.
Do you want to take this slide or you want me to?
So the last slide just talks about some actions and review. So just to let you know that we continue to review the incident management system with administrators during the school year at the leadership conference. We had an initial administrator training in the summer, and then also we continue to have these meetings with new administrators so that they understand incident management and coding. And then, of course, we're always available for questions on that. So we have a consistent review of that. It's ongoing. We had a state review of the incident management data, the SBAR codes in July, and then I'm going to let Dr. Petrone talk about the ATSS teams.
Before we talk about ATSS, I want to give a shout out to Joey Crawford, who helped us with pulling a lot of this data because he did all of our discipline last year and he left us in a really good position to keep this going. So, yep. All right, so Ms. Mullenkamp and I are going to talk to you about Amherst Tiered Systems of Support. And most of you have probably heard us talk about VTSS. Some of you have been along for the VTSS process for a long time. You know we have a VTSS grant. And that stands for Virginia Tiered Systems of Support. But this year we rebranded and we became Amherst Tiered Systems of Support because we thought it was really important to make this our own and have it something that reflects our community, our students, and our families. So we have a new branding, and Naomi Giles actually made that logo for us, and we are moving forward. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Mullenkamp to give you an overview.
Thank you, Dr. Petrone. So we are excited to just give you an update of what's happening with ATSS, Amherst Tiered Systems of Support. So this is a multi-tiered systems of support. It's really a decision-making framework that allows us to focus on the whole child and establish supports that create a school environment where every one of our students can feel success. It allows us to put systems into place to help our schools give multiple levels of support to students with a clearly defined process, which just makes it more effective and efficient. This is what we call our implementation logic. It's just a picture of all the things. So ATSS provides us a structure through which we're able to put systems in place. We analyze data. We then, based upon what the data is telling us, put into place evidence-based practices that are used for us to help improve student outcomes in areas like academics, our behavior, mental health. It's really preventive in nature instead of being fully reactive. So this framework supports implementation of any initiative or program we might want to utilize. We look at data specific to whatever we're focused on, for example, behavior, like we were just talking about. We determine our need based on that data, and then we select an evidence-based practice to put into place. We use our systems to train those support our staff in the implementation of whatever practice we have decided to use. So we use those systems to support our staff, to help maintain consistency in implementation, regardless of who is doing it. So rather than relying on institutional knowledge, for example, Joey, knowing discipline data, we are putting written processes and procedures in place so that no matter who's doing the work, we're able to do it, right? It helps us align our organizational structure so that we can then implement strategies, put policies in place or procedures to ensure that we're working toward those common goals, that common vision, every child, every day, right? And we use that data to inform our decision-making. And then we choose those evidence-based practices, those are activities, strategies, interventions, to then produce those positive outcomes for our students. It's really about collaboration. It's a family, community, school partnership. And so you've heard us talk about the tiers. This is just a visual of what this looks like. So the biggest piece is our Tier 1 supports. So Tier 1 is universal supports for every student. Tier 2 and Tier 3 are more targeted interventions based on student needs, and they're delivered in small group or on an individual basis. This just gives us some highlights of why do we do this work, right? And it really allows us to, if you know the phrase, work smarter, not harder. So we're able to intentionally focus on whatever the data says is needed and go to work. All students are getting what they need in order to feel success. It's really what it's about. So we wanted to kind of highlight to give you some examples of what the work looks like in our schools. So one of the schools I work with as a division coach is Central Elementary. And you can see a visual of their behavior expectations at the top there, as well as their behavior matrix. So when we begin implementation, when we began, we focused on PBIS, which is positive behavioral interventions and supports. And so behavior was really where we put our focus at the beginning of implementation. And so the first steps were to determine, all right, what are our expectations? What do they look like in each setting in our building? And this is so that students know exactly, explicitly or taught, what is expected of them. So I understand what I need to be doing, right? And this was created with student voice, with staff voice, with family voice. So really just getting everyone's input on what does being safe look like in the bathroom or on the bus, right? And laying that out in forms so that then it can be taught. And it's taught in the setting as much as possible. So in the classroom, this is what it looks like to be safe. And if I go to the cafeteria, I may be teaching them about this is what it looks like to be considered in the cafeteria. Once we have taught those explicit lessons, then we're able to acknowledge when students are showing those desired behaviors, right? And so Central uses a good office referral system in which students get their names announced and what they did to earn that acknowledgement, and they get a small token. They get so excited to hear their name on the announcements. But also staff who are utilizing the good office referral are acknowledged as well with one of their desired rewards. A lot of our work in ATSS has been in Show Up Amherst work as well, so focusing on our monthly themes. But we're also, at every meeting, we're looking at attendance data, we're looking at behavior data, and we're trying to put things into place to improve any areas we see that are concerns. For example, if we're seeing a lot of behaviors on the playground, we may do a lesson specific to the playground, those kinds of things. So just to show or to share with you that this is impactful and we are seeing positive outcomes. Earlier in the fall, the chronic absenteeism rate for Central was 45.08%. That has improved in the last data we've collected to 34.46%. So that's a 10.62% improvement in our chronic absenteeism rate. So that's a huge success. In addition, when we looked at first semester incidents from 21-22 school year, there were 55 at Central. And in 22-23 school year for the first semester, there were 45 incidents. So that's an 18% improvement in our discipline as well. So just highlighting, we're doing great things at Central through our ATSS framework.
So I'm going to talk about Manellison as an example, and Central Elementary School has only implemented in Tier 1 of ATSS, but Manellison and the secondary schools have been able to implement in all 3 tiers starting this year, so they actually went into Tier 2 this year. And just to give you a visual of the data that they look at, this is the actual presentation that Manellison was looking at their last ATSS meeting, and this was prepared by Allison Ashton and Carissa Beeson. I'm just giving out all the shout outs tonight. But they pulled their data for the year, then they looked at a certain time period to see if the intervention they were looking at was working. They were looking at which location, what day of the week things were occurring on, what time of day, and they were trying to narrow down the problems so that they can come up with really good solutions to those problems. So some of the things that they've done in Tier 1 is they had a issue with foul language at Manellison, so they did a lesson on profanity where they said, here's what might be appropriate where you live, here's what might be appropriate in your neighborhood, but these are the expectations at Manellison Middle School, and this is how these are the consequences if you don't follow those expectations. And they made it very clear to students what would be considered profanity. They've also had grade level attendance competitions where every day the school or the grade level that has the best attendance rate for that day gets to dismiss first. So they actually only dismiss a minute earlier than the other kids, but they're the first ones to go to the bus. And you can actually hear the kids who don't get called. Like if they call 6th grade, you could hear the 7th grade hallway like, oh man. So the kids really get into it. And they've been doing some really great fun activities. Just everybody who shows up today gets to play kickball and just trying to make sure those show up activities are going on. And those are tier 1 things that Manellison's doing. For tier 2 and tier 3, they knew that they had some behavior challenges coming into this school year, so they looked at last year's data and they made a list of who needed the most support. And so they started out the year doing what's called a 2x10, where it's a relationship building activity where you meet with a student for 2 minutes for 10 days, and you talk about something that interests that student, not about academics, not about your classroom, something in their life, and you get to know them. And that went so well that some of those kids, those teachers decided they wanted to mentor, and they've kept them all year long. And they're also doing some behavior plans with things like reminder cards and trying to put in specific things that just help support kids throughout the day. So how do we know if we're doing a good job with this? We have something that's called the Tier Fidelity Inventory, and this is an actual assessment that every team does. We call it the TFI, and we're measuring our implementation of ATSS. So here's where we stand for elementary, because it is only Tier 1 implementation, and this is year by year. We're on year 3, so the blue is the first year and the orange is the current year, and most of our schools continue to improve. We have had some administrator changes, we've had some coaching changes, so there's some schools that have had a little bit of a lag here and there, but for the most part, all of our schools continue to improve. They're all doing really great jobs. The goal in Tier 1 is to be at 80% or higher, so 2 of our elementary schools have met that goal now. And then in our secondary schools, looking at Tier 1, Manellison and Amherst Middle School are really doing a great job with their Tier 1. The high school is, we do things a little differently at the high school. We have a Lancer support team this year. We're not doing the traditional model, so we're never going to hit that 80 mark, but that's by choice because that does not work for our high school, and this is again why we made it Amherst Tiered Systems of Support. What was being recommended was not exactly what was best for our school building, so we're okay with this score. We think it's a great score, and we're very proud of that. And if we look at our overall implementation at the secondary schools, because that includes all 3 tiers, you can see we're doing a really good job trying to get things moving in the right direction. So any questions for Ms. Mullenkamp or me about ATSS?
Board?
Mr. Terry,
Ma'am.
quick question. When I'm looking at this, the data, this is coming from our schools, so this is something that your team in Amherst has developed and designed. Thank you, I just
Yes.
wasn't from outside data.
No, we have a VTSS grant that supports us, and we do use some of the state resources, but the data and all of the decisions that we make and all of the interventions we put into place are done by our ATSS teams. And I probably should have mentioned this, but our teams consist of teachers, administrators, school counselors, parents, and students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I just want to make a quick comment on that. I just want to thank our ATSS teams at all of our schools, what they do, and our division team for their work on this, and Ms. Petrone and Ms. Mullenkamp for their work as our ATSS main folks behind the scenes getting things done. So thank them for the work they've done.
Yes, ma'am.
Just want to piggyback on that, Dr. Wells. I want to thank the team for the bullying policy. I thought it was a good thing when you presented it, but seeing tonight the outcome of how clearly you could identify those and identify those that are not, but still address them as they're appropriately needed. So the clarity there was just awesome. I could see your vision from starting with the policy. That was really nice. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Moving on.
Student suspensions, 5.04.
Okay.
Chair, members of the board, you will see the suspension report.
Okay. Board, any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on
All
to,
right.
yes?
Next, 6.01, we have finance. Ms. Laconich.
going to try this again. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the school board. Before you tonight are your financials for through the month of March. From the revenue standpoint, our next big thing is we will be waiting for the final calc tool from the state that will reflect our March 31st ADM, and that will let us know what our actual funding is going to be from the state and help us to finalize our projections and to start closing out the year. Again, we know we have the hold harmless from the calc tool error, and that will be incorporated in that final calc tool. Good news, we have seen relief in the area of our electric and fuel bills. In March, our electric payments were 14% higher than they were the same time the prior year. When we were coming to you in February, it was 48% higher. So it has started to level off. The March fuel, the average gallon was $2.83, and at our peak was in November, it was $4.70. So we hope to have that trend continue and we see it level off because it will, help our bottom line. Just a reminder, we are going to have that budget transfer request coming to you for the overage and the transportation. I'm just waiting to see, again, how the fuel goes and all to see what we're going to need on that. And that'll address the overage on the object code summary on page 5. Another thing that we're going to be doing is you'll be getting a supplemental appropriation at your next board meeting in May. And this is going to include additional funding from the county to assist with the purchase of additional bus. And kudos to Dr. Hoden, because somehow he was able to secure a bus that already has the AC on it. And with that, the county will be paying, it was about $120,000 of that they were able to fund, and we just have to come up with the difference. So we appreciate the collaboration with the county and Dr. Hoden able to secure that. I think the bus could be here.
Next week.
Yes.
And again, we just really like to thank the county for helping us out in that endeavor.
And
Absolutely.
The total of the bus, I think, is around the
136,
yeah.
826.
So we need to get it, we'll come up with 16,000. We'll need to find our 16,000 to cover it, but I think we'll be okay.
Great.
So we were able to secure that, and then we'll have the supplemental appropriation to follow that will cover that. Also, if you're looking at page 5, you will also see the child nutrition has gone negative. Now, the good thing with that is where they're over expending in their expenditure budget, we're also projecting the revenue to be higher than is budgeted as well. So we'll be able to do a supplemental appropriation to bring those up. So we're just going to continue monitoring as we close out this year. Do you have any questions?
Board? Yes, ma'am.
So if I'm correct, that means 2 new buses, right, in the last month?
Yes.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Very exciting.
Ms. Lukanich, a quick question. How is our revenue looking for the year? Is it coming in as it should?
It is. It's been a little trying not having, the correct calc tool, but they were able to give us a spreadsheet where we could manually calculate it and then try to tie it back. We're on target. Again, we're going to have the shortage that we were already anticipating with the ADM decline. But having that hold harmless, it was about $377,000 that it would have negatively impacted us if they had not done so. So we're on target. We're monitoring it right now. I mean, it's still early. We still have a few months, but I'm looking at year-end balance of about $1 million.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the board? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lukanich.
Mr. Chair, we next have instruction. Dr. Norman.
Thank you, Dr. Wells, members of the board. Tonight I just have some reminders and information regarding some accountability updates. The reminders are specific to next board meeting. I just want to make sure you're aware that you must review the plan for safe return to in-person instruction, continuity of services, and the use of grants funds, along with the ARP ESSER 3 spending plan. These were plans that were established in 2020 when we shut down school. We were required to complete these plans. They're about I don't know, 30 pages in length. It discusses everything that we're required to do from the state. And we present these to you every 6 months. You don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to approve them. You did that in 2020. This is just an update of where we are in the process of that plan. So I just wanted to let you know if you would like to review those before. The current plan is what we're under, where you, we showed that to you December of 2022. That is up on our website. It's under What's News. You can go to it, click on it. It's available to you. We will bring you changes if we have, like for next year, we know that the ESSER funding will change. We had 1 year only contracts. For this year, they will go away next year. That'll come off. We'll show you those changes. So you have that information ahead of time before they are impacting. The next thing is that in regards to our grant funding, we will also have a piece of information that kind of ties in with that initial plan, the wellness component and what we've spent funding on that to date, as well as where we're headed with instructional services and support services for our students who are considered at risk or receiving intervention services right now. Any questions in regards to the plans? That's just a heads up that if you want to review it before what you're currently doing, so then you can understand the changes. That's it. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next piece of it is in regards to, back in March, I told you that I was going to separate the two, the data as from state accountability to federal accountability, and kind of bringing you an update in regards to what we have done. You received a packet of information from me. I believe it was printed out for you, so you would have a copy of it. But tonight, it's on board docs as well. So last month, you got a hand-printed copy. Tonight, it's up on board docs. Hopefully, you were able to take a look at that. But in case you did not, I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts of it, okay? So the first part of it, the VDOE required us to present to USDOE. VDOE presented to the federal government their plan for a consolidated state plan. What it does is it sets up annual, yearly measurable targets for over a 7-year period. It deals with targets for reading, math, chronic absenteeism, our graduation rate, ELL, participation rates. And so all of that kind of goes into place. That plan was presented by VDOE. It was accepted by the U.S. Department of Education. And now it is trickled down to where it is implemented for us. The annual measures actually show us, we received the information in December. It shows to us that in current year, so in May of 2023, we, instead of having a 75% pass rate across the board in reading, it moved it to a 77. Instead of having a 70 in math and science and history, it moved it to a 72. So what the state did is they presented their plan. The federal government came back and said, okay, it implemented to the state. But what happened is during the middle of our school year, where we set up our goals and our progress monitoring and what we were going to do for kids and where we wanted to be at the end of the year, where we needed to be at the end of the year, it bumped it up midway through another 2 points on each, if that makes sense. So we thought we had to be here. Now we got to be here by the end of the year. We have provided that information to our principals. We have provided that information to they have provided information to their teachers. It's been tweaked into their 45-day plans. But I will tell you that is a huge change in the middle of a school year. Any questions on that?
Board? Okay.
Okay, moving to the next one. We also provided you in March an update for state standard changes. And I want to note 3 specific changes that are really important changes that came to us in March, in January, okay? I believe that's when it was. The reduction in failure rate for chronic absenteeism is no longer available to us for the 2022-2023 school year, which allows us to be accredited for the 2023-2024 school year. So where we were going to be able, we set goals, we provided those goals to the state approved those goals in regards to our chronic absenteeism, where we could reduce our chronic absenteeism rate by 10%. The state has stated that we are no longer allowed to use that for the upcoming accreditation. We are at baseline, so this current school year is going to be our baseline data for the next school year. And it's if you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. Do you want to add anything, Ms. Petrone? Okay. That is a drastic change because if I can, Mr. Crawford, use the high school. I think you were at, if I'm not mistaken, you were at a 38% chronic absenteeism rate at the end of the school year last year? 43, I'm sorry. The only way that he could move the mark down to where he needed to be 15%, really and truly, logistically be able to do that, was to have an R10, reduce that chronic absenteeism. That's an incremental improvement for him over the course of 3 years. Now, in order for Amherst County High School to be accredited, they have to meet the 15%. So that is a drastic change. And do you have anything you'd like to add?
You know, I'd just like to add that the effort is there on behalf of all of our students and staff. We need help from families and parents. We need it to be important. Changes that were made over the course of COVID, I think had a great effect, not just on attendance, but everything else that's going on, and we're seeing those effects. It's better. Our chronic absenteeism rate right now is better, but it's not where it needs to be. We're even close to where it was pre-COVID. So still need to work, but we need help desperately from our families and the support system that our students have at home.
Thank you, sir. Along with that chronic absenteeism, normally we get a 3-year average. You can use a 3-year average because this year is our baseline year. There is no 3-year average. They will not go back and use the last 2 years, so that's a double whammy for us in regards to that. The next portion in regards to state standard changes that have occurred this current school year is our vertical scaled score. So for the last 2 years, we've been providing our students with student growth assessments. We've been given scaled scores, which they take a growth assessment at the beginning of the year. Last year, they took the SOL test at the end of the year. We had a scaled score where we could show like a Lexile that showed whether or not kids made progress from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. This year, we started out with that same vertical scaled score. At the beginning of the year, we took a mid-year, and before we took the mid-year, actually, while we were taking the mid-year, the state changed the vertical scaled score. So there was no way we could do an alignment from beginning of the year to mid-year, and then that same scaled score that they changed mid-year now does not work with the SOL score at the end of the year. So they are stating that they will give us a scaled score, vertical scaled score for the end of the year, but they probably won't have that until after all testing and later into June. That does not help us when we are trying to support kids in the classroom, teachers in the classroom, to be able to tier our kids for instructional supports. And so that is a huge change in the middle of a school year as well. And the last thing that changed this year in regard to our state standards is that our grade 3 through 8 reading and math standards blueprints were changed in February. So every content area in the state has a set of standards, and those standards are required to be taught for any course that we offer students opportunities to take. In regards to those standards, if there is a test that is given at the end of the school year for that particular course, like a third grade reading test, there is this blueprint that says, I'm going to have these standards and I'm going to test. I have 10 standards. I'm going to test a kid on 7 of them, and 3 of them, they're not as important. I need them to know about them, but I'm not going to assess them on those. Those actually changed in February. So what teachers had mapped out and planned, and they teach them all, but if I can give you an example, if I am a 4th grade math teacher and I'm teaching fractions, and I'm also teaching statistics or probability, it is really easy for a kid to understand probability. You know, I roll a dice and I see how many times that's going to come up, and I can pretty much determine that. And I got some hands-on stuff. Fractions are a whole lot harder. So I, as a teacher, am going to plan 3 or 4 weeks longer to teach fractions, or 2 or 3 more weeks to teach fractions, and spend a lot of quality time, because that's a harder concept for a kid to get than the probability, where I may only spend a week in regards to that actual skill or that content. How I plan out my year is based on that blueprint. They planned out their year. The blueprints changed in February. So there was some significant adjustments that were made in February to kind of tweak what they were doing in their 45-day for the remainder of the year. So that is another thing that our teachers and students, and they've done a fantastic job in adjusting and done some really quality things with students. So I've been impressed. But as a board, those are 3 major things in regards to our state standards that changed midway through the year. I don't believe I've ever experienced where the state has made changes like this. The last piece is the State Board of Education was presented with a state accountability system improvement, I guess is what it was called, where they are going to reform the state accountability system. If it's approved, phase 1 actually begins for the accreditation year of 2024, 2025, meaning that if it's approved next month, the implementation starts for us in August. That's a lot to do in the summer to get ready for a new accreditation system that would take place and be actually implemented the year that we're doing a crosswalk. Usually you get a year before that changes. That would not be the case if these reforms are changed and approved by the state board. That was a lot in regards to federal and state. Do you have any questions? And then I have one more thing to talk to you about.
Board? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
With the changes that the state decided to kind of lay on you, they did give you the overall look of, say, the 7 to 10 items, right? In the original
You mean the
plan.
standards?
Right.
Yes, sir. So I have the original blueprints and I have the new blueprints, and we're cross-referencing. Teachers have cross-referenced those and have figured out where the differences are.
But you feel that the teachers have spent the time where it's needed to teach each individual?
So there's a couple of areas that I am concerned with. Our 8th grade, we front load the year because we have a writing test that's in March.
Right.
That they're just finished up.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I would have probably placed earlier on in the school year in regards to reading comprehension, that they're going to have to add that back in their spiral reviews. So you really have to take it individual standard by individual standard for grades 3 through 8, math and reading.
So do you feel that maybe some of the I guess, standards they assumed were not going to be as important ended up being important? Is that what I'm understanding?
I think you could say at every grade level there was one change that was major that they've already tweaked.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Anything else on the board? It's nothing like changing rules in the middle of the game, is it?
I've never seen this done before. It's been interesting. The last thing I'd like to discuss is our spring monitoring feedback and the instructional rounds. So we have our Fab 5 that have been in academic review. Dr. Wells talked to you at the last board meeting in regards to his conversation with the VDOE and how well that went. You have reports for each of those schools that actually did the spring monitoring that was required, and did a great job. Those reports were required to make sure that you have a copy of them. We have already met with the principals at each of the schools and how they would implement those the recommendations that have been required by VDOE. And we have already taken the commendations that we as a division received, as well as we had one recommendation from the state overall as a division to where we would continue to differentiate our support for each individual school that was under accreditation conditions or academic review. So I just wanted to make sure you had that information. If you have any questions in regards to them, please feel free to reach out to any of us here at the school board office, but directly to the principal if you choose to. They have walked through the process, they know exactly what's going on, and they've done a fantastic job. And that is all I have, unless you have any questions.
Board? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
All right.
Okay.
Next, I guess I am. Okay. 7.02, Mr. Neighbors.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Been asked to update you all on our kindergarten registration and Smart Start registration efforts. This evening, I want to start with kindergarten registration, and in the spirit of Dr. Petrone, want to use the appropriate shout outs there. Just give credit to Ms. Wheeler and her team for doing a tremendous amount of work to get these events together. We do have kindergarten registration coming up on April 26th and 27th. For any of those listening online, on the 26th, we'll be at schools from 8 to 4, the 26th from 8 to 6. That's at each elementary school in the division. We'll have on-site appointments for screenings will be conducted for those students. Anyone 5 or older, by September 30th, we'd like to see them there, be talking to them about coming to kindergarten next year. I do want to note for the board that you have received a copy of the flyers, relevant flyers at your place to be able to review that information. That's also been distributed via our website, on social media, as well as actually giving physical copies out to families in the community and our schools. There's online registration available. We'll also be offering registration on site for families who would prefer to do it that way. And as mentioned before, we will have in-person screenings, hopefully by appointment, but if families show up, we want to have those students come in and complete those as we need to. For Smart Start, very happy to report that Mrs. Albert and her team have received 103 applications to date. That's well ahead of where we were last year at this time. So very excited that the word is out and families are looking to engage with that programming at the early childhood level. We're looking at 126 slots allotted to us next year. That number is still a little bit soft, depending upon budgetary considerations and how that gets approved. This past year, we had 124 slots that were allocated to us because of staffing limitations. We were at 118 slots filled. And when I say limitations, meaning we didn't open another classroom for those 6 additional slots that we had. We're looking to make initial decisions by May, or no later than May, I should say. I do think it's important to note that when we're talking about those 126 slots, that does not include our early childhood special education program, so it's above and beyond. We also have additional slots available to us through our mixed delivery partnership with Bright Beginnings. We actually have students in some of our private preschools and daycare centers in the Amherst area. So a lot of pathways for families to get that early childhood support, and off to a great start there, getting those registrations in. Again, you all have those documents in front of you, but if you have any questions whatsoever, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay. Board? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Next, we have 8.01, Human Resources with Mr. Gallagher.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, I only have a few items for you this evening. The first one is the vacancy memo that you have before you. It shows the professional positions that we still have remaining open for the coming school year. And you have our classified positions below that, some of which we are still attempting to fill this year, and some that are vacant coming open in next school year. But I'll take any questions that you have.
Board, anything? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Terry, Mr. Gallagher, so I'm looking at this, and it looks like all our positions are filled at the high school for next year? Is that correct?
Well, well, close. Right now, for the high school, the CTE teacher
Okay,
position,
there we go.
that imaging technology position, and I believe the school nurse position needs to be filled as well.
Yeah.
And other than that, yes.
But as far as instruction, so we've got English
Well-
teacher, math teacher, science teacher. That's really exciting.
The sciences, the English, yeah, those positions and so forth, we have filled for next school year. So we
Awesome.
and,
Good job.
We hope that we continue to not have any other openings and support our amazing teachers. And
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Ma'am?
Mr. Gallagher, I was real excited to see science being filled up too. That's great.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick question. Do we have enough qualified and experienced substitute bus drivers? Do we have trouble finding those?
I don't know an exact answer to that. I know that they do have a pool of qualified substitutes that are very valuable. Many of the substitutes end up working quite a bit in transportation. I don't know if you, Dr. Hoden, you have any other input with that. I don't hear a lot of information that we are lacking, but again, I'm sure we could always utilize more. But
We could always utilize more. A lot of our, retired drivers will take trips and things to kind of ease that pain, but, we always need additional substitutes. Usually what happens are most of the folks that we get on end up going on a route because we're so shorthanded.
But we also are utilizing mechanics, on occasion we'll utilize mechanics. If there's a late call out in the morning, a mechanic will get on a bus and complete the route, so we can do the routes.
So we're making do, but we could
Yes, ma'am.
use
We
more.
could always use more.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
we have a number
absolutely.
of standby drivers, but the standby drivers oftentimes end up being pretty consistent drivers.
Right. And just to let you know, we're knock on wood, but a lot of our neighboring divisions are actually canceling routes because they don't have enough drivers. So we're not in that boat, and hopefully we never are, but that's just to let you know where that is across the Commonwealth and the country.
But we have amazing drivers, as you know and as you've seen, so hopefully we can maintain those individuals because they do an amazing job, so.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Terry.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick
ma'am.
question. If we have to use our mechanics and stuff, they've gone through background checks.
Oh, they're our,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to
All
affirm that.
employees, they're
Correct.
trained,
Good.
they're
That's right.
trained just like the drivers. They've gone through the same training. Yes, ma'am.
Right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Moving on.
All right, so the next item you have is our ACPS recognition months and days calendar. In the past, we have typically utilized the Virginia Department of Education's recognition day calendar to kind of drive how we coordinate, sending out recognitions, making sure that we are addressing those individuals, those groups, those events that occur throughout the course of the year. With different changes at the VDOE, it's just become more inconsistent over the last couple of years. So what Dr. Wells wanted to do was to make sure that we kind of did a little bit of investigative work and identify all the different groups within our employees, and as well as important days, topics in education, special events, and so forth, and we coordinate that consistently into our annual Recognition Days calendar, and that's what is reflected in front of you there. And so what that does is that helps us drive social media recognition, email recognition, other celebrations that happen at the school and division level for different groups within Amherst County Public Schools, as well as special months, events, important educational topics, and so forth. This is just for informational purposes, that you have that awareness. And of course, I've found that it is subject to change, because we pull this together and then we realize there's something out there that requires recognition, and we weren't aware of it, and we may add that to the list. So it could be fluid.
And we're also using this with our Diversity Council, and whereas the Diversity Council, their homework this month is to look at this list and pick out the months and events that they want to focus on throughout the year, to push things out to schools and so forth for next year. So that'll be something we work with them on as well.
And they may help develop activities that would be aligned with curriculum, so they're not necessarily additional, but some good activities that would recognize different individuals, groups, or otherwise that could be built into the schedule for schools. Okay. All right, any questions there?
Board, anything?
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Well, my last piece is just really a save the date shout out, which is to remember that our retiree recognition dinner is going to be on Thursday, May 18th. We've talked about that before, but to make sure that you put that on your calendar for 5:30 at Prothrow at Sweetbriar. It is important to be there to help celebrate and recognize those amazing individuals that have put that time into working not only with ACPS, but many have years of service in other divisions and elsewhere. So we want to take that opportunity to value and recognize those individuals. There are 16 retirees currently on the list that will be present. Each will be able to have, basically an and one, have a guest with them. One of those individuals is from 2022, so we have 15 retiring from this current school year. So please do put that on your calendar. I look forward to seeing you all there. It's a great event. It'll be somewhat similar to last year, and it's a nice opportunity to have a meal, to recognize some amazing individuals and celebrate.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, all right, moving on.
Next, we have student representative. We have Fatima Grace Arami here this evening.
Can you hear me? Okay. A few things today. Evan's not able to be here because he had to work, but speaking on behalf of him and me, tomorrow's the day of giving, and we're all super excited about that because a lot of the students are involved in that and going all around the county, so that's like super exciting. Also, the musical that I had mentioned last meeting, I was able to attend, and hopefully some of you were also. It was a great show. And then also we had a spring fling dance back in March for lower classmen, just to have another dance, especially with COVID, like a lot of social events weren't able to take place. So that was exciting for a lot of students. And then also just spring sports are continuing to take place. So if you have time to go watch a game or two, you totally should. But yeah.
Thank you. Moving on, Dr. Wells.
All right, Superintendent matters. The first at your place is not on the agenda, but the Golden A ceremony, you should have an invitation for that at your place. That is May 8th at 6 p.m. at the high school, and I'd encourage you all to attend if at all possible. That's a good evening where we recognize our students. And students get to recognize their teacher as well, but it's a great evening for the students and families. Again, that'll be May 8th at 6 p.m. Fatima Grace has mentioned the Day of Giving, which is tomorrow, and we'll have students going. I think we gave you a list of locations at your place. It's too many for me to name right now, but every school in the county will have high school students going to, either working with elementary students in projects and reading, or working with them at the school in projects, but also going to community-based projects to give back to our community. And our community gives us so much through tax dollars and support, it's important for us to make sure we give back to our community and show the community that our students, again, that we talked about earlier for discipline, you know, a small percentage of our students are ones getting in some trouble, but the majority of our students, the vast majority of our students are doing some very good things and are very good, very valuable members of our community. So we just need to make sure that our community realizes that, and we can show our students off in our community. So it's a great day, and it's good for our students to be a part of our community and our community to see that. So if anybody wants to ride around tomorrow and look at some of the sites, give me a call. I'll be glad to drive you to some of the locations that we're doing that. Graduation is May 26th at Divine Center at 7 p.m. We'll do what we've had in the past. We'll have a room for the board. We'll have some things of that, snacks of that nature, and then we'll have graduation. But we'll be at Divine Center, and it will be on the 26th at 7. We'll have more to come on that as we get into the May meeting. Policy FFA, we mentioned this last month, and I gave you a copy of the policy. It should be at your place. But I wanted to just bring that up for discussion. It would be my I didn't have it as an action item, but I do want to bring it up now, would be looking at talking with everyone in the community and so forth, naming the field, the baseball field. There's a sign in the outfield saying Jim Procopio Field. I think that's within the policy. It's not naming a facility, it's not naming a building, but it would recognize Coach Procopio for what he did in our county during the time frame he was here, while he's still able to be recognized. And I think that was a push from a lot of his players over the 30 years he's in the county. And so I would make a motion to the board that we could do that we name the field, Jim Procopio Field, and again, put signage up to stating so. I do feel it's within the policy limits of FFA to be able to do so if the board so chooses.
Board, any?
Motion to approve?
Okay. I have a motion. Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Spring break starts tomorrow as soon as the bus is clear for most of us. And I think staff as well as students are looking forward to this. From our office standpoint, majority of folks will be taking some time. I encourage them to take some time next week. If you need to contact anyone, reach out. Some may be in places they might not want their phones to be answered, like Dr. Norman's going south for a few days. But if you need us, reach out to us. But the offices will be on limited hours, as some folks are taking additional days of vacation. We're supposed to work 2 days next week, and so I know some folks, including myself, are taking a couple of the extra days. And so we're accessible, but we might not be here in the office. But if you need us, we'll be glad to answer any questions you have. And I think it's just important that, we recognize the need for our staff. I think it's a good time. It's been a big push, but and the full moon this week hasn't helped. The mental health RFP, we are in the process of finalizing discussions with the company we're going to go with. Since we haven't finalized or signed any contract yet, I don't want to say publicly the name of the company, but we are in the final stages of negotiations with that company to provide mental health services, and to include a form of day treatment, but more just mental health services for our students next year. So we will have some of those services for our students. So we are at that point where we feel we'll have some services to provide our kids, and it won't be a total where we're not doing anything. So we are feeling better about that now after going through the negotiation process. So, Ms. Petrone, Dr. Petrone, do you want to add anything? Okay. All right. That's all I have. Any questions from the board? Board, anything for Dr. Wells? Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Moving on next to committee reports from school board members, and if we can lump in together the board reports and comments, we'll do it all at the same time. Mr. Rossi, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Spring break, so I'll keep it short. I know everybody's anxious to get out of here tonight. It's been a long night. Dr. Petrone. All right. Congratulations. Yeah, it's nice to see that, the the staff here working so hard and helping the children move forward and to see them take the time to move themselves forward. It's good. It's a good example, you know. Look what I can do. You can do it too. And that's good. Don't just get stuck where you're at when you can move forward. I like that. I like that. I think it's going to inspire the children to keep moving forward and keep fighting for that. And, you know, comments earlier about, you know, some of the scores. Yeah, I was concerned about them last year when I first got on the board and I saw the numbers. And yes, definitely concerned. And, you know, we're being, you know, trying to get through what we came through and to move things forward. It's not something that we're going to do overnight. You know, we're trying to think outside the box and to move things forward. The teachers are working very hard. The staff is working incredibly hard. And as you heard tonight, sometimes they change the rules. And that's difficult to do. But I don't think anybody's discouraged. I think they're ready for the challenge. And, you know, as we're, you know, all aware of every child every day, and I think if we have a child that doesn't make it through that test, then we have failed, not in a bad way, but a way to understand that we can do more. There's more to do as long as the kid still fails. As long as they're still a low grade, we still have something to do. So I want us to think about that every child, every day, and keep moving forward. Because if you have a child that didn't succeed, what can you do to change that, and how can you move it forward? We need to keep focused on every child every day. And when we start looking at numbers, sometimes we get confused, and we see that 1 or 2% moving in the wrong direction. Just remember that there's children behind those numbers. They're individuals. So keep pushing forward. And you all continue to do a great job. And I'm very proud to be part of Amherst County and what you guys have done here and the direction you're moving. You know, the Show Up Amherst initiative, I think, is moving us forward by leaps and bounds. I mean, I hear it when I'm out and about. I hear it. I hear the quote. It's working. And the community is pulling together and supporting what's going on. And I know there's bad things that happen, but we overcome those and move forward. And I appreciate that in every one of you. Thank you. Oh, happy Easter.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Justice?
Chairman. Terry. So I got to meet with the Central Virginia Governor's School Governing Board earlier this week, and it was, we had some good news there. We have a new teacher being hired, first teacher that's been hired in about 5 years. That's a pretty low turnover, and comes highly recommended. They had science winners in the regional science fair announces winners. Amherst County had a lot of winners in there, and I was very proud to be a part of that. The budget looks good, and the director, Dr. Smith, is being really innovative in looking at trying to keep our costs competitive while expanding the versatility of the credits our students are getting as far as transferability. So I really appreciate that. I got to participate in reading in one of the classrooms at Central Elementary, and it was pajama day, so I got to go and mismatch slippers and all sorts of fun stuff, including a Santa cap and eye thing, and got to pretend I was asleep when the kids came in. So it was very, very fun. Definitely one of those highlights. I'm excited about Giving Day. Fatima Grace, I'm so glad you got to be here tonight. And thank you. I'm glad you got to do the spring dance. And Dr. Norman, thank you for getting your reports into bite-sized pieces for us. And all your hard work. And Dr. Patron, congratulations. And I am encouraged by the forward movement of our students. I am in awe of our instructors who are ahead, are way ahead on their goals and where they expected to be. They've been very efficient and, more importantly, very individual with their students. And I look forward to that day when we have another year to add to this year's chronic absenteeism rate. So thank you all. Have a really great Easter.
Thank you. Ms. Berg?
Yes, I would like to thank our lone speaker tonight from the community and expressing her concerns over the performance levels. I think we could all agree we all have concerns over those levels and are striving to move forward. Also would like to say thank you to the ATSS team for putting together their presentation. Also to Dr. Dr. Hoden and our new and special person there, Dr. Patron. Congratulations, we're so proud of you. For their mid-year discipline reports, that was very interesting, and it's going to see, I'm curious to see how we are going to progress going forward and bringing those numbers down even more. Also, I like to say that I'm excited and thank you to our County Board of Supervisors and Dr. Hoden for providing another bus for us with air conditioning. That's a big one. And thank you to Dr. Norman for trying to explain the Virginia Consolidated State Plan and all the curveballs they seem to send us all the time. Thank you to our lone student speaker, Fatima, for today. Sitting there all by yourself, putting up with us. Thank you so much. And also, while we're getting ready for our Easter break, I want to wish everybody a very wonderful, happy Easter. And please keep the families and the faculty in Tennessee in your, thoughts. And just remember how lucky we are to be here in Amherst County. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ligon?
Okay, well, congrats, Dr. Patron. Hard work paid off, and you are definitely here helping us through all these storms that we are coming through with that good knowledge. Laura met on yesterday just for a call meeting to review the drafted budget. We can't do a whole lot yet because we're still waiting on the state as well as Lynchburg City to approve their budget, because some of the things that Lynchburg City is going to do affects Laurel. But we find that things are just like anywhere else. The prices have risen and things are needed. But Dr. Lewis and her people have done a wonderful job. So we'll get back to you when that budget's approved, hopefully in the month of May. Otherwise, things are well at Laurel. I did attend that wonderful play at the high school, Ms. Crawford, and it was great. And those people are to be commended. I felt like I was somewhere on Broadway. It was just an excellent presentation and fun, exciting, and well done. The music, I took particular notice to that. The music was wonderful. I did attend the budget presentation with Dr. Wells as he presented to the Board of Supervisors. Want to commend you for your first excellent budget presentation to the Board of Supervisors, and so we appreciate that. And ending up, we've had some good information tonight, a lot of information, and all of these things are very dear to my heart. You can't attack them all at one time. I liked what Dr. Houghton said about the discipline, that it looks like huge numbers, but compared to the amount of students that we have, not all students are doing bad things, and that's to be noticed. And those that we are kind of catching doing some things that we don't like, we still want to continue to monitor how we can decrease those numbers. There are new problems arising in discipline. It's not as simple as dropping your books down the elevator shaft or something. We got some other things on the horizon we won't go into tonight, but Dr. Wells has assured me that we're going to be looking deeper into what we can do here to monitor some of these things that are going on. And then the next biggie, other than discipline, is, yes, the performance numbers. And we share in that hugely, if that's such a word, about what was said tonight. I have those on my table. I look at them all the time. I think what we need to do, we have plenty of data, lots of it. We even got some more tonight. But then we need to find out what action and what implementation we're going to do. Not that you haven't told us, and I know people are working hard on that, but I think that is the question now. Exactly what are you doing to fill these gaps in? And that's not a new question. It's not just for this administration here, but it's been asked through the years. And remediation is an answer, and Ms. Thompson, I share exactly what she was saying. We don't want to lose instructional time when we have numbers facing us. That's like we're in a hurricane with no umbrella. However, the reason I didn't say stay in school any longer, because I think, as I was informed, that we're working on it. But I want to just stress that it used to be that summer school, whatever that means, PAL scholars, and all these scenarios, isn't that an effort to bring this together a little bit or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, whether the children attend or not, we don't know. But are we still encouraging parents with students who are struggling, and I use that word carefully, that summer school would be an advantage to them? Do we have that out there somewhere?
Yes, ma'am, and we actually have targeted very specifically and invited those that are on our Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports.
Well, see, that's interesting, because with that data that Ms. Patron Dr. Patron and Ms. Molencalf gave us, all that should go together to help to solve this problem. But now, when it's done, we can't always control. If we say we want the children to come to summer school, parents don't send them to summer school, we're going to go right back into the season next year of a repetitive state. But we appreciate, so I'm just interested about implementation or remediation in a way that we can actually see it happening. I don't know what that means, kind of, but we don't want to have this conversation every year, and I've had it a lot of years, and the gaps. But I think that the wording, and I was looking at this, and I'm going to be quick. The wording sometime, and I asked this question 20 years ago, I really did. When you say students with, what are those categories? Not student with disabilities, but disadvantage, what's the wording?
Economically disadvantaged.
We must understand that, isn't that an overlap there?
It is.
And so it would be better sometime, somewhere, somebody just really having a good time and having a fun day, broke that down. Because it could be that some of the same students are in the same groups that's making it look like it's
We
all
do.
to pieces.
We do.
You do have it broken
Yes,
down?
ma'am.
Okay, I don't think
Yes,
I've ever
ma'am.
seen that.
So
But don't send me any more papers.
I will. I promise.
Okay,
I won't.
I'll digest these tonight, but I think that's worth a discussion. And as I close, these subjects of discipline and achievement is more important to me than most policies. I'm just being honest. We have to prove the policies, and I read them, I love them, but the real life day experiences of how we're going to get these children where we need to get them, achievement-wise, is something that we just need to look at. And we're looking at, what, less than 40 days of school, or some, what's the magic number? How many days left this year? Whatever it is, whatever it is, let's make somebody happy.
here all the
Whatever
time
it is, we can't solve every problem. But see, we'll be going into another year. We'd like to have a plan before we go into another year. And I'm so sorry that the state is still playing games. But Dr. Wells, when you have your vast meetings, is this a conversation that the superintendents, well, who do you tell in the state to stop doing this? So we can help you.
The superintendent told the state superintendent at the last couple meetings, but
To no avail.
here we are.
Yeah. Well, I just thought I'd throw that out there because, you know, it's difficult. And Abby, Ms. Thompson used to do this for a living, numbers and things. And it's hard when the state changes the target overnight. I don't know how they expect school divisions to deal with this. Absenteeism was one thing. And that's my last statement, Ms. Terry. I don't know. I think parents are listening to me tonight or not. Children have to go to school. You know, I'm out and about in the daytime going from house. I see kids out. I know they're supposed to be in school. I think about running over them, not running over with my car. I'm getting ready to back that up. I'm getting ready to change that. I'm thinking about running up to them with my car and saying, go to school. Not running over them, but just run right up and say, aren't you supposed to be in school? Because I know that they're school age, not just in Amherst County. I'm in the city of Lynchburg. That's for them. But I don't understand. I did ask a student one time, and this is good. I did ask a student one time, why are you not in school? And he said, I don't know. No, he did. He said, I don't know. I said, why are you not in school? I don't know. just don't want to go. Don't want to go today. So I don't know. Maybe we ought to have some kind of contest. Answer the question, why are you not going to school? But anyway, I'm good. Happy Easter. Good.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Thompson?
Well, I just want to thank everyone tonight. I was particularly taken with Gloria's comments tonight, and I want to say thank you so much for that, for just your passion and your honesty and your challenge that you've presented to us. It is something that we need to talk about. And I know in our discipline data, we have been presented with some wonderful data, but as we move forward, we need to make sure that we're looking at our subgroups, and I know you are. And if there's things that are not accurate there or skewed in any way, we need to make sure that we're working on that. Y'all know that, but I just don't want that to go under the radar. And I know that I want to say to my board members as well as those out there, I know I held a different view than you did tonight. And I want the teachers and the administrators in this division to know how much I value you. I know the hard work you do. And my comments tonight had nothing to do with lack of appreciation for you, because I have been one of you and I appreciate you beyond measure. And forgive me, I will cry. My comments tonight come from my passion for students. And I just know that it's important for them to be in school. It's important for them to have instruction that's quality instruction. And whether it's 4 days or more, I just value that. That's why I'm an educator. So when we talk about attendance, and Mr. Crawford, I don't know what your attendance is now, but what was it at the end of the year? 43% were chronically absent. That breaks my heart because I know what they're missing. So for me, I value 4 days. So please take that for what it's worth. I'm not upset that it didn't go my way. I just don't want you to misinterpret why I voted that way. I do think if we value attendance and instruction, that we need to promote those. So that's why I tried to do tonight. So if I can get myself together here. I would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for their additional bus and that support. That was unexpected and a wonderful surprise. And also appreciate their review and their support of our budget and where that lands. We will see, but I know that they have always been supportive and will continue to do that, and I just want to thank them publicly for that. I also want to say congratulations to Dr. Patrone. I know that's a lot of work, and you deserve the accolades, and thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, just the policy on the bullying and where you have honed that in tonight spoke highly to me of your skills, and I just want to say thank you. Fatima, I'm excited about the Day of Caring for tomorrow, and I want to ask you, where will you be?
I plan to be at the Neighbors Helping Neighbors.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say thank you to all the students, because all the years I've been on the board, the students in Amherst County have really taken a leadership role on the Day of Caring and have been a wonderful role model to everybody in our community. So I just want to thank them for that. And then appreciate the work on the ATSS team. I've done that as well, and I know that it is a lot of long hours and a lot of hard work, and I do appreciate that. And I know that we're working towards improved student outcomes. So I'm looking forward to seeing the progress as you move forward, and I just want to say thank you to everybody, and as many people have said tonight, hope everyone has a nice break, and happy Easter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. So in closing, everybody's really kind of hit most of the stuff I really wanted to say, but I do want to thank Dr. Patrone and Ms. Mullenkamp for all the information you do provide. It's you guys always come with a lot of stuff for us. And to the Board of Supervisors, it's great to see that we have such a good working relationship now. Hasn't always been that way, but I'm glad to see that, they're supporting us and we're going to step up and help support them wherever we can. The chronic absenteeism stuff, we can just stress to the parents again and again, please make sure the kids are coming when they're able to come. It's important to the schools all the way around. I'm looking at all these little items that we put on here from the calendar in May, so we're getting ready to be a very busy season for everybody. She's not here tonight, but Miss Emmerich, the play Sister Act was awesome. Mr. Crawford, kudos to the high school. Looking forward to maybe having a new auditorium in a couple years and being able to fill that one. That would be nice to be able to see that. The Day of Giving coming up tomorrow. When you see the community come to the high school and support the play, and then to have the students go out and support the community, it's a two-way street. Show Up Amherst, it goes both ways. So, Fatina, thank you, you and all the students for participating in that. Especially the ones who go to the schools, the other schools, because the younger students see the older students participating, and that encourages them, and they want to do that when they're older too. So it's very important. So thank you very much. And I think it's a great honor to the Procopio legacy to name the field after him. He was had some great accomplishments while he was baseball coach at Amherst High School, and his players have gone on to do great things also. So I think it just feeds into his legacy. And so also, I want everybody to go have a good spring break. Please be safe. We want everybody to come back as they leave here, and have a happy Easter this weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, it's recommended the board convene a closed meeting for the following A1 personnel matters.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion, we go into closed session.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.